Let's just keep pushing. Chapter 24. Valancy herself made Cissy ready for burial. No hands but hers should touch that pitiful, wasted little body. The old house was spotless on the day of the funeral. Barney Snaith was not there. He had done all he could to help Valancy before it. He had shrouded the pale Cecilia in white roses from the garden, and then had gone back to his island. But everyone else was there. All Deerwood and up back came. They forgave Cissy splendidly at last. Mr. Bradley gave a very beautiful funeral address. Valancy had wanted her old Free Methodist man, but Roaring Abel was obdurate. He was a Presbyterian, and no one but a Presbyterian minister should bury his daughter. Mr. Bradley was very tactful. He avoided all dubious points, and it was plain to be seen he hoped for the best. 6 reputable citizens of Deerwood bore Cecilia Gay to her grave in decorous Deerwood Cemetery. Among them was Uncle Wellington. The Sterlings all came to the funeral, men and women. They had had a family conclave over it. Surely now that Cissy Gay was dead, Valancy would come home. She simply could not stay there with Roaring Abel. That being the case, the wisest course, decreed Uncle James, was to attend the funeral, legitimize the whole thing, so to speak. Show Deerwood that Valancy had really done a most creditable deed in going to nurse poor Cecilia Gay, and that her family backed her up in it. Death, the miracle worker, suddenly made the thing quite respectable. If Valancy would return to home in decency while public opinion was under its influence, all might yet be well. Society was suddenly forgetting all Cecilia's wicked doings and remembering what a pretty modest little thing she had been. And motherless, you know, motherless. It was the psychological moment, said Uncle James. So the Sterlings went to the funeral. Even Cousin Gladys's neuritis allowed her to come. Cousin Stickles was there, her bonnet dripping all over her face, crying woefully as if Cissy had been her nearest and dearest. Funerals always brought back Cousin Stickles' own sad bereavement. And Uncle Wellington was a pallbearer. Valancy, pale, subdued-looking, her slanted eyes smudged with purple, in her snuff-brown dress, moving quietly about finding seats for people, consulting in undertones with minister and undertaker, marshalling the mourners into the parlor, was so decorous and proper and Sterlingish that her family took heart of grace. This was not, could not be, the girl who had sat all night in the woods with Barney Snaith, who had gone tearing bareheaded through Deerwood and Port Lawrence. This was the Valancy they knew. Really surprisingly capable and efficient. Perhaps she had always been kept down a bit too much. Amelia really was rather strict, hadn't had a chance to show what was in her. So thought the Sterlings. And Edward Beck from the Port Road, a widower with a large family who was beginning to take notice, took notice of Valancy, and thought she might make a mighty fine second wife. No beauty, but a 50-year-old widower, Mr. Beck himself very reasonably said he couldn't expect everything. Altogether, it seemed that Valancy's matrimonial chances were never so bright as they were at Cecilia Gay's funeral. What the Sterlings and Edward Beck would have thought had they known the back of Valancy's mind must be left to the imagination. Valancy was hating the funeral. Hating the people who came to stare with curiosity at Cecilia's marble-white face. Hating the smugness, hated the dragging, melancholy singing. Hating Mr. Bradley's cautious platitudes. If she could have had her absurd way, there would have been no funeral at all. She would have covered Cissy over with flowers, shut her away from prying eyes, and buried her beside her nameless little baby in the grassy burying ground under the pines of the back-up church, with a bit of kindly prayer from the old Free Methodist minister. She remembered Cissy saying once, "I wish I could be buried deep in the heart of the woods, where nobody would ever come to say, 'Cissy Gay is buried here,' and tell over my miserable story." But this... However, it would be soon over. Valancy knew, if the Sterlings and Edward Beck didn't, exactly what she intended to do then. She had lain awake all the preceding night thinking about it and finally deciding on it. When the funeral procession had left the house, Mrs. Frederick sought out Valancy in the kitchen. "My child," she said tremulously, You'll come home now? Home, said Valancy absently. She was getting on an apron and calculating how much tea she must put to steep for supper. There would be several guests from up back, distant relatives of the Gays who had not remembered them for years, and she was so tired she wished she could borrow a pair of legs from the cat. Yes, home, said Mrs. Frederick, with a touch of asperity. I suppose you won't dream of staying here now, alone with Roaring Abel? Oh, no, I'm not going to stay here, said Valancy. Of course, I'll have to stay for a day or two to put the house in order generally, but that will be all. Excuse me, Mother, won't you? I've a frightful lot to do. All those up-back people will be here to supper. Mrs. Frederick retreated in considerable relief, and the Sterlings went home with lighter hearts. We'll just treat her as if nothing had happened when she comes back, decreed Uncle Benjamin. That'll be the best plan, just as if nothing had happened. That's the end of that chapter. I understand where Valancy's coming from. I really do. People gawking and such. I don't know. I've also been one of those who attended a funeral of a long-forgotten family member, some cousin off in the wilderness, just to be there because it's a terrible thing. Yes, a lot of people go just to gawk and stare. That's very true. But there are a lot of people back in those woods who will go just in case they can be of any help at all. Just in the off chance. You know, people out back are, generally speaking, good souls. They want what's best for people, even if they have no idea how to go about that. One more chapter today. One more chapter. Chapter 25. On the evening of the day after the funeral, Roaring Abel went off for a spree. He had been sober for 4 whole days and could endure it no longer. Before he went, Valancy told him she would be going away the next day. Roaring Abel was sorry, and said so. A distant cousin from up back was coming to keep house for him, quite willing to do so now since there was no sick girl to wait on, but Abel was not under any delusions concerning her. She won't be like you, my girl. Well, I'm obliged to you. You helped me out of a bad hole, and I won't forget it. And I won't forget what you did for Cissy. I'm your friend, and if you ever want any of the Sterling spank and sot in the corner, send for me. I'm going to wet my whistle, Lord, but I'm dry. Don't reckon I'll be back afore tomorrow night, so if you're going home tomorrow, goodbye now. I may go home tomorrow, said Valancy, but I'm not going back to Deerwood. Not going? You'll find the key on the woodshed nail, interrupted Valancy, politely and unmistakably. The dog will be in the barn, and the cat in the cellar. Don't forget to feed her till your cousin comes. The pantry is full, and I've made bread and pies today. Goodbye, Mr. Gay. You've been very kind to me, and I appreciate it. We've had a damn decent time of it together, and that's a fact, said Roaring Abel. You're the best small sport in the world, and your little finger is worth the whole Sterling clan tied together. Goodbye, and good luck. Valancy went out to the garden. Her legs trembled a little, but otherwise she felt and looked composed. She had something tightly in her hand. The garden was lying in the magic of the warm, odorous July twilight. A few stars were out, and the robins were calling through the velvety silences of the barrens. Valancy stood by the gate expectantly. Would he come? If he did not know he was coming. Wait, are they eloping? Holy crap! Put on the sirens, we might get a smooch! We might get a smooch here, people! Valancy heard Lady Jane Grey far back in the woods. Her breath came a little more quickly. Nearer and nearer she could see Lady Jane now, bumping down the lane. Nearer, nearer, he was there. He had sprung from the car and was leaning over the gate, looking at her. Going home, Miss Sterling? I don't know, yet, said Valancy slowly. Her mind was made up, with no shadow of turning, but the moment was very tremendous. I thought I'd run down and ask if there was anything I could do for you, said Barney. Valancy took it with a canter. Yes, there is something you could do for me. she said evenly and distinctly. Will you marry me? Let's go! Valancy! Valancy the stud! Valancy the ultra giga chad! Up and asking a boy to marry her in 1910 Canada? Let's go! The audacity! What is this girl? Come on, I gotta get something for that in chat. We gotta get something for that. Oh my gosh. What does he say? What does he say? For a moment, Barney was silent. There was no particular expression on his face, and then he gave an odd laugh. Come now, I knew luck was just waiting around the corner for me. All the signs have been pointing that way today. Wait. Valancy lifted her hand. I'm in earnest. But I want to get my breath after that question. Of course, with my bringing up, I realize perfectly well that this is not one of the things a lady should do. But why? Why? For 2 reasons. Valancy was still a little breathless, but she looked Barney straight in the eyes, while all the dead Sterlings revolved rapidly in their graves, and the living ones did nothing, because they did not know that Valancy was at that moment proposing lawful marriage to the notorious Barney Snaith. The first reason is Valancy tried to say I love you, but could not. He had to take refuge in a pretended flippancy. I'm crazy about you. The second is this. She handed him Dr. Trent's letter. Holy crap, she's pulling it all out. I'm giga shocked. We might add an extra chapter today, I have to know. Barney opened it with the air of a man thankful to find some safe, sane thing to do. As he read it, his face changed. He understood, more perhaps than Valancy wanted him to. Are you sure nothing can be done for you? Valancy did not misunderstand the question. Yes, you know Dr. Trent's reputation in regards to heart disease. I haven't long to live, perhaps only a few months, a few weeks. I want to live them. I can't go back to Deerwood. You know what my life was like there, and she managed it this time. I love you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. That's all. Barney folded his arms on the gate and looked gravely enough at a white saucy star that was winking at him just over Roaring Abel's kitchen chimney. You don't know anything about me. I may be a murderer. No, I don't. You may be something dreadful. Everything they say of you, it may be true, but it doesn't matter to me. You care that much for me, Valancy, said Barney incredulously, looking away from the star and into her eyes, her strange, mysterious eyes. I care that much, said Valancy in a low voice. She was trembling. He had called her by her name for the first time. It was sweeter than another man's caress could have been just to hear him say her name like that. If we are going to get married, said Barney, speaking suddenly in a casual, matter-of-fact voice, some things must be understood. Everything must be understood, said Valancy. I have things I want to hide, said Barney coolly. You're not to ask me about them. I won't, said Valancy. You must never ask to see my mail. Never. And we are never to pretend anything to each other. We won't, said Valancy. You won't even have to pretend you like me. If you marry me, I know you're only doing it out of pity. And we'll never tell a lie to each other about anything. A big lie or a petty lie. Especially a petty lie, agreed Valancy. And you'll have to live back on my island. I won't live anywhere else. That's partly why I want to marry you, said Valancy. Barney peered at her. I believe you mean it. Well, let's get married then. Thank you, said Valancy, with a sudden return of primness. She would have been much less embarrassed if he had refused her. I suppose I haven't any right to make conditions, but I'm going to make one. You are never to refer to my heart or my liability to sudden death. You are never to urge me to be careful. You are to forget, absolutely forget, that I'm not perfectly healthy. I have written a letter to my mother. Here it is. You are to keep it. I've explained anything in it. If I drop dead suddenly, as I likely will do, it will exonerate me in the eyes of your kindred from the suspicion of having poisoned you, said Barney with a grin. Exactly, Valancy laughed gaily. Dear me, I'm glad this is over. It has been a bit of an ordeal. You see, I'm not in the habit of going about asking men to marry me. It is so nice of you not to refuse or offer me to be a brother. I'll go to the port tomorrow and get a license. We can be married tomorrow evening. Dr. Stalin, I suppose? Oh, heavens, no, Valancy shuddered. Besides, he wouldn't do it. He'd shake his forefinger at me and I'd jilt you at the altar. No, I want old Mr. Towers to marry me. Will you marry me as I stand? Demanded Barney. A passing car full of tourists honked loudly. It seemed derisively. Valancy looked at him. Blue homespun shirt, nondescript hat, muddy overalls, unshaved even. Yes, she said. Barney put his hands over the gate and took her little cold ones gently in his. Valancy, he said, trying to speak lightly. Of course I'm not in love with you. Never thought of such a thing as being in love. But do you know, I've always thought you were a bit of a dear. And that's the end of that chapter. Let's fucking go, chat! That's about as close as a man like that says that to getting that he loves anybody. That's about as close as he gets. Can we get some can we get some absolute rowdiness in the chat for Valancy? What a big move on her part. Oh my gosh. I kind of just have to sit back and revel in that for a minute. I thought that I never once imagined that she was going to ask him to marry her. I thought what was going to happen there was that she was going to ask him if she could live in his cabin with him. And it would be more scandalous. And it would be like this thing where it goes back and forth. But no, she's just going to up and marry him. And he's like, okay. I mean, I don't know what I would say in that situation. I have no earthly clue what I would have said in that situation. Girl just up and wants to marry me after maybe one date. Holy. I don't even know. I don't even know. I feel like I might have approached it exactly the same as he did. I mean, with the knowledge that you've only got to be married to her probably till the end of the year, there's no downside for him in that situation. Everyone in town already hates him. Like, that is just a win. That's just a win for our boy.